Hi yogis, and welcome to another episode of Asana Lab with me, Oceana. Originally in this class I was going to be covering downward facing dog for you, but as soon as I started planning it I realised that there is a topic I need to cover beforehand because it's something that a lot of yoga postures have in common, and I would also say it is probably the most frequently asked question that I get when I'm teaching in-person classes. And that, of course, is how to bear weight on your hands without causing injury or pain. Most people come to yoga practice and suddenly realize that they either have weak wrists or maybe an old injury flares up suddenly. And I'm not really any different. I have an ongoing wrist issue myself. My personal issue is related to the fact that I have hypermobility syndrome, so my body produces defective collagen, which affects all of the joints in my body, as well as all of the ligaments. The connective tissue is looser than it should be, so I'm very prone to my joints moving past the normal range of motion or dislocating completely, which of course affects the wrists when you're practicing a lot of yoga. And in my case, I got told that I could have surgery on my wrist to fix the issue, but there was a very, very high likelihood that the issue would flare up again after a couple months because of my hypermobility. So I decided to hold off on surgery and thought, well, let me see if I can manage this injury a bit better, figure out some ways around it. And I was quite surprised to find that even though I practiced several different movement disciplines, actually yoga had the best answer for my problem. And that it's actually a term in yoga referred to as Hasta Bandha. Now, if you've hung around a yoga studio long enough at any point in your life, you will have heard somebody somewhere refer to the bandhas. And it's a Sanskrit term that usually translates as a lock or seal. You can sort of think about the bandhas as a muscular and energetic engagement that you use to support a regular yoga practice, and it can also intensify that practice. Usually people are referring to one of the three Maha-Treta bandhas or Treta Maha-bandhas, either way. Basically the three main bandhas, which are all located in the torso. So Mula Bandha, which is the pelvic floor, Uddiyana Bandha, which is the solar plexus diaphragm here, as well as Jalandhara Bandha, which is the throat. The thing that these three have in common is that they are all a diaphragmatic sort of dome shape, and they're all involved in our breathing practice. So whenever you breathe, all three of them, as you inhale, descend down, and as you exhale they move up into like a dome shape. And that's why when you sit upright your breath is the most comfortable, because they sort of are able to synchronize well. And there's loads of lesser known bandhas, and two of those quite important ones are of course Hasta Bandha, which is the hand, and Pada Bandha, which is the foot. And now you might ask yourself, well, the hands don't really have any sort of diaphragm or lock or seal on them, so what on earth are they talking about? But the thing that they're referring to is when you correctly use your hands on the floor, you can create an engagement that is similar to how we use the other bandhas. And in the hands, you can actually create a suction cup. And that is essentially what they're referencing. Now, I think it's really helpful to think of your hands, especially when you're weight bearing, and you sort of, oftentimes in yoga when you're bearing weight on your hands, you're in some type of inversion. Even downward dog is an inversion because your heart is above the head. And the thing about inverting your body means that now your hands have to become your feet. And it's really helpful to think about the hands in this way. So the anatomy of the hand now changes. Now this, of course, is the heel of your hand, and the heel of the hand directly supports your wrist. This is where all the cushioning and padding for your wrist has to be. This now becomes the ball of your hand, and your fingers now become your toes. They're slightly more delicate than the toes might be. And of course, as we always say in yoga practice, when you come to stand, we always talk about grounding down through the four corners of your feet. And then if you apply that to your hand, we would say you ground down through your big toe, your pinky toe, as well as the outer edges of the heels of your hand. And that is a helpful start to understand how Hasta Bandha works. A couple of things that I do want to cover before we get into how to fully engage the hands is things not to do. So one of the main things that has sort of been troped around sort of alignment, and I will not put myself on a pedestal and pretend that I have not given this alignment cue, because I 100% have, but some of the more recent research says that, you know, one of the issues of carpal tunnel syndrome, and to explain carpal tunnel syndrome, it's very painful nerve pain that runs from your wrist all the way down through the arm. So the carpal tunnel is actually where the base of your thumb meets the secondary sort of heel of your hand on the outer edge of the hand. So this literally tunnel is where the carpal nerve runs through. And if you lose the ability to create this sort of tunnel in the heel of your hand, if this gets too flat, then the carpal nerve is exposed, and that is what causes carpal tunnel syndrome. And so one of the issues that we have in yoga practice is that for the longest time, yoga teachers would say, spread your fingers nice and wide when you come into any kind of weight bearing on your hands. And what this causes is, you can see if I show you the side view of my hand, if I'm spreading my fingers really wide, I'm actually flattening the base of my hand here, the heel of my hand. Whereas if I was to relax my hand now, and I was to keep it the way that I would normally if I was just not thinking about it, then I have a lot more curvage here, and it's actually fleshier. And this heel of the hand is really what provides a little bit of cushioning for your wrist when you're bearing weight. So I would suggest that even though it's great to have a big sort of surface area to balance on, especially when you get into arm and hand balancing, I would suggest that you want to sort of relax the hands and then simply place them down on the floor the way they want to be. So they're not completely, you know, I haven't got my fingers glued together, but I'm sort of relaxing the hand down. Secondly, very important as well, is not to grip with your fingers. So what I've been seeing a lot, especially it's very trendy on Instagram, I think they're even calling it spider fingers. For all the arachnophobes out there, that's very helpful. So what I'm seeing, especially in people who are doing hand balancing, is that they are talking about really gripping your fingertips in towards the center of your hand in order to have better balance and stability. And I mean, I do actually agree that this is helpful. Like, this feels very sturdy, and probably more so than if I relax my fingertips. But the problem with that is that then if you fall out of that arm balance, or you make a sudden movement, your ligaments, which is actually the only thing supporting the bones in your hands, so the bone, basically the hands are bones and then a bunch of ligaments that connect to the muscles in the forearms, and kind of like a puppet, these muscles control your fingers by pulling on these ligamenty strings. So when you're gripping, what happens is that you're putting tension on those strings. And those strings are made predominantly, I think something like 98% out of collagen. And so when you injure or tear one of these strings, there is a big chance that it may never ever heal again. And those are incredibly painful injuries. So again, my suggestion would be that you do not grip the floor in that way. There is some stuff you can do instead so that you ensure that you still have the same ability to balance on your hands. So let's talk about what you can and should do. As I said, think of the hand. As soon as you put your hands on the floor and you start bearing weight on them, start thinking of your hands as feet. Change your perspective on what the hands can do and how they function. So firstly, really one of the priorities that you should place is that you stop putting all of your weight into the heel of the hand, because this is really the most delicate part of your hand and it's there to support your wrist. But if you're dumping all of your weight here, you'll soon feel the wrist pain, I would say. So what you want to do is, it's impossible to get all of your body weight out of the heel of the hand, but what you can do is to distribute the weight equally in the rest of the hand. So what you want to be thinking about is to actually prioritize shifting your weight into this knuckle right here, the one that's at the base of your index finger. This is what a lot of hand balancing experts refer to as the sweet spot. This is where you find balance in the hands. If you're doing crow pose, any of the arm balances, handstands, etc., this is where it's at. And the more you can think yourself into this space and start to shift your body weight there, the more it will ease up and free up some of the sort of weight and tension on the heel of your hand and your wrist. If from here you lose balance in the hands, you will find it again between your fingertips and the sweet spot. So if I demonstrate on the floor, essentially I'm going to think about pressing this down. If I had my shoulder directly above the wrist and I was trying to balance, if I lost my balance, I would actually have a sense that the heel of my hand is lifting, and I then am able to control it by keeping these really steady and simply feeling the ground through my fingertips, and I'm sort of shifting the weight forwards and back. You know, some of this is slightly more advanced and you probably wouldn't find that too much in a plank pose, but you can sort of play around with that same sensation. The sort of suction cup Hasta Bandha that I spoke about earlier on as well is quite vital in providing you a lot of grounding and stability in the hands. And the way that that works is that actually you're not pulling in your fingertips, but you're engaging your pinky finger and your thumb and retracting them. It's a sense of retracting them and engaging them back into the center of the hand. The only way that I can really explain how that feels, because it's sort of something that you learn over time, you start to feel that engagement, that drawing in, is if you were to hold a regular yoga cork brick. If you hold it simply with your pinky and thumb, you can start to really feel that shoot up through your forearm, and that is the engagement you want. Of course, when you're holding a brick, I mean, I will say, unless you have man hands like I do, you may wish to hold the brick on the long side rather than the wide side. Of course, when you're holding it in this way, you are gripping with your fingertips. So this is not an ideal way of understanding that engagement. You do sort of have to put your hands on the floor and start to have a sense that you're not just gripping with your fingertips, but you're pulling the entire thumb and the entire pinky finger and drawing them back in towards the center of the hand. So hopefully you sort of start to understand that. And really, you always want to use your most basic postures to start implementing these ideas. So in a tabletop and a downward dog, these are your perfect times to understand Hasta Bandha. And then once you feel you've got a grip and you've sort of been able to adjust your hands in those postures, take that engagement across and allow it to come over into your high plank and your chaturangas, which is more challenging. And eventually, you know, I think you'll see a big shift in your hand and arm balances where this really strongly comes into play, especially when you're doing handstands. So hopefully some of that has been useful to you. If you would like to do some strengthening for the wrists, then I have an out of office yoga flow that covers that. So I'll link to it somewhere up here in the video. There'll be a little icon. If you have any questions about today's class and what I've talked about here, then leave those in the comment section down below. If there's anything else you would like me to cover, also leave that in the comment section. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, if this was helpful, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and now I definitely promise that next week we will be covering downward facing dog. We'll take all of this on board into the next class. If you want to find me anywhere else online, find all of that information in the description to this video. And aside from that, I hope to see you soon for another Asana Lab next week. Have an amazing weekend. See you soon, yogis. Bye.